to our demonstration on canning because you had a garden. Now what are you going to do? I'm Linda Nichols, and I am the president of Sustain Jefferson. We're a countywide sustainability group, and we specialize on some of things like this. So this is Janet McConaughey, and she is our vice president.
Hello, we're trying to do the mask thing appropriately, but still get you to hear us. I'm Janet McConaughey. I'm also with Sustain Jefferson, but I do go to some of the Waukesha County Green Team events. And so we wanted to show you all of the different things that you can do with water bath canning, which is a good place to start. And we're going to start in kindergarten. So those of you who have canned before, you might be bored to begin with, but for somebody who's never done this before, we want to make sure and cover everything. So I'm going to do some things on safety, and then Linda, I will step aside and Linda will talk to you about ingredients and tools. And then I'm going to go back and talk about the recipe while she chops everything up, because I have a tremor, and if I chop, I'll have food everywhere. So the very first thing we want to do when you're getting ready to can is to wash your hands. That's very important. And you would use soap and water, do the 20-second thing. If somebody was, you would expect the same thing out of a commercial place to make your food safe. So do not, be lax on these sorts of things just because you're doing it at home. Another thing you want to do, my kitchen sink, and I have read this in several places, that your kitchen sink has more germs in it than your toilet bowl, because people generally wash their toilet bowl more than they wash their sink. So you want to go ahead and sanitize, and I would recommend using a weak, a 5% bleach solution, or Lysol, or whatever kind of thing you use, vinegar if you're, being green, and wipe everything down. Make sure that your sink is clean, because you're going to take all your vegetables and put them in the sink, and we're going to rinse them all off first and make sure there's no dirt, no insects. I mean, once you can it, the insects aren't going to hurt you. It's just added protein, but probably the rest of your family wouldn't appreciate it. Jars. So what I generally do is the beginning of the year, if all my jars are dusty and dirty or full of cobwebs, I bring them up and put them through the dishwasher and let the hot cycle take them, and then that way I know they're clean. If I do that one day and I don't use all of my jars, then I don't put them through again the next day. If I'm going to use them, I just fill them with hot water so that there's not a big temperature differential. We're going to make our brine and heat our brine so it's boiling. And you don't want to put, even though these jars are made to take the heat, you don't want to risk it. You want to be able to have the jar hot before you put the hot things in. You want to go on your jars, run your fingers around the lid, make sure there's no nicks or cracks, because if there is, don't even bother. The jar lid will not seal, and you can use this jar and you can make pickles in it, but you can't leave it in the cupboard for an extended period. I would use this jar first, put it in the refrigerator and let it sit for a week, and then eat these first. You don't need to throw your jars out just because they're imperfect, but don't use them for long-term canning. Let's see here. You want to wear shoes. Please wear shoes. You're going to be dealing with boiling hot liquids. And I myself have, I just had to scrub my floor again. It was all sticky because I was making pickles and little juice drops were everywhere. And so it was, actually tacky. You don't want to be spilling the boiling water or the pickle juice or whatever you're cooking on your feet. And another thing to do is, if you have long hair like me, and get it out of the way, because that would be another turn off to eating your your nice organic home canned stuff if your family has to pick a hair out. Oven mitts are a good idea, although we're not going to be actually reaching in and getting the jars out by hand. There's a tool for that. Linda will show you. And you want to make sure, safety-wise, that you have a valid recipe. So here is the Bald Canning Book. Kerr, Kerr, is another brand of jar, and they have their own recipe book. You can get some off the internet, but make sure that it's a reliable source, because you don't want to poison yourself. And if you're doing this kind of canning, pickling, you want to make sure that the salt and the acid are adequate to keep your food safe. All right, so I will let Linda talk about the tools.
Okay, one thing to point out with the jars is the different sizes. So you have what we call the regular mouth, which is this size, and you can buy the rings, or bands as they call them now, and the lids. You cannot reuse these. You need new ones every time you can. Then the other size is the wider mouth. And a lot of people like these because they can easily clean them. So when you're going to purchase new lids or bands, make sure you match the correct, so you have the correct size. And then as you can tell, they come in the quarts and the pints, and actually quite a big variety of sizes, especially if you're going to do jellies and jams. It's kind of fun to have smaller ones, like I have over there for giving away as presents. Also, if you don't have a reliable kitchen scale, be sure and get one. Some of the recipes are going to ask for pounds of, and so you want to make sure that you can measure your produce accurately. Being accurate is really important in canning, especially with jams and jellies. One of the things that both Janet and I use, and we'll show you two different kinds, are the ways to get the jars out of the water. And this just is a nice little grip, like this. And what I usually do is I have a hot pad right underneath and do this and then carry it over to wherever I need to go with it. Very, very handy. Also in regards to measuring, if you're measuring a liquid, make sure you're using measurement that's for liquid. Again, we want to be as precise as we can. And then when it's time to fill our jars, it's always nice to have something like this, because you want to make sure that you're keeping this area clean. You want to be able to put on clean bands and a clean lid. And they come in a couple of different sizes, but I would suggest getting this. It will save you a lot of cleanup time. And then one other thing that I love to use, because I do heat up my bands and lids. Not everyone does that, but I do like to have mine heated. And then you can just lift them out of the hot water like this. Don't ever boil them, but just I like to have mine a little bit warm when I put them on. And then if you're using a recipe where you have to watch out for bubbles, a lot of times with jelly you do, you can kind of use this as your stir. Handy little thing to have. Okay, and some of the common ingredients that you'll use when you're pickling is canning salt, canning and pickling salt. So make sure you get one like this. Don't make do with table salt. You really want to have the correct salt for your brine. Also,
no iodine in salt, or it makes
right.
it cloudy.
Yes, no iodine. Also, you'll have sugar in a lot of your recipes. There's pickling spice. A lot of recipes will call specifically for pickling spice. If you want a good flavor, go with what your recipe says, and not try to skimp too much. We are going to be making dill pickles today, so obviously we need cucumbers and we need dill. You can usually get this at the store sometimes. The best place to get really nice dill is your farmer's market. So if you live in an area that has a farmer's market, or grow it, it's pretty easy to grow. And also in this recipe, we will be using garlic, and this is from Janet's garden, and we will be cutting up some onions. And that's in this recipe. And here's some of the lids that you can purchase to make sure you always have fresh lids.
these are all different things that you can do in the water bath canner. So this is the recipe that we're making today. These are sweet kosher dills. So there is a lot of sugar in them, but don't eat too many of them, but they're absolutely delicious. The recipe comes from Buck Smith, a friend of ours in Sustained Jefferson. Tomato sauce, salsa, jams and jellies here, pickled beets. This is pickled green beans. This is applesauce. This is little tiny baby onions, pickled. And this actually has a grape leaf in it because that helps to make things crunchy. It's got the oxalic acid, or you could use a green tea bag also if you wanted to help make your things crunchy. This is pickled asparagus. This is pepper jelly. Some people like to take this and put it over a block of cream cheese and then scoop it on crackers. It's delicious. You can do fruits, pears, peaches, plums, apricots, that sort of thing, but you have to make a sugar solution. This is not pickled. And then these are my pickled. So you can do any number of things, and this is a good place to start, but you cannot do anything in a water bath that's low acid. It has to be have vinegar and salt in it in order to do this, or sugar as a preservative. Anything that's low acid, like just plain green beans, not pickled green beans, potatoes, carrots, all these things you can beets without the pickling, but they have to be done in the pressure canner because they're low acid, and if you don't do it right, you could injure yourself. Now, I've always learned that after you make your product, you let it sit for 24 hours, then you write on here what it is and the year that you did it, but you take the band off, because if something goes wrong and say you didn't put this in long enough and there's some dirt or bacteria, whatnot, yeast in here, and it starts fermenting, you want the gas to be able to escape, to blow the lid off and not explode the jar. My first experience in canning was in 1970. I didn't read a book. I went out along the roadside where I went to college in Lexington, Kentucky, and I picked elderberries, and I brought them home and I heated them up in a pot and I put them in a jar, put the lid on it, and stuck them in the cupboard. And a week later, I had a terrible mess to clean up because they exploded everywhere. So don't do that. All right, so we're going to talk about the recipe. Now, we're not making a whole recipe. This one is very easy to understand and to cut down the amounts. So it calls for a gallon of vinegar, a half a gallon of water, 6 cups of sugar, I know it's awful, and a cup of salt. And then however many onion slices, garlic cloves, dill, you can put a hot pepper in if you want. Buck says he puts a hot pepper in some, and then they use those pickles in a Bloody Mary. So once you learn the basics, then you can start experimenting with other things. If you put too many hot peppers in, they're low acid, so you got to be careful.
Learned that.
Yep. All right, so Linda is cutting all that up. What we're going to do is I'm going to probably cut this in half, perhaps. And so instead of a gallon of vinegar, I'm going to use 32 ounces. That's half a gallon, right? Check mine out. And where is our vinegar? Right there. Now, you cannot get canning lids this year anywhere. But everybody's canning now, so my advice is this winter, when everybody's done canning, load up for next year. Don't wait for canning season.
Shannon,
Yes.
Now, this is a new recipe for me. I've never made these. Janet, what kind of cucumbers should we use? What varieties for this recipe would be the best? What should people look for?
You know, I guess a pickling cucumber. They're usually listed in the catalogs as eaters, picklers, English, hothouse. There'll be different varieties. We are just using today whatever we could scrounge up because we're all, with the drought and the heat and the cucumber bugs, we've all had trouble coming up with what we need. So this back one is on now. Mistake in my math, we're just doing a quarter of a recipe. So it was 32 ounces of vinegar, 16 ounces of water. Then it'll be 1.5 cups of sugar and 1/4 cup of salt. That will be a quarter of everything. Double check that. And you want to put all of this in a pot and let it come to a boil. So, excuse me. No, I should have found out where the measuring cups are. All right, so I said 1/4 cup of salt, right, and 1.5 cups of sugar. And again, you could probably use kosher salt, but it won't taste the same because it's not as salty. But you definitely can't use anything with iodine in it. All right. So that should take care of our brine.
So we're going to let that go to a boil before we add any other things, right?
We're going to let that come to a boil. And what we're going to do is wash our jars out real well, and then we're going to stuff them with all this. And then we will fill them with brine once all the pickles and stuff are in it. Or the cucumbers are in it. Now we've got our hot water bath here, which this is hot, but you see the steam coming off. We started that boiling. You have to have enough water in it that it will come up and cover the jars in order to force the air out.
Or do you have to have a rack inside?
Yes.
Oh, that's something we should have said, yeah. Because you don't want those jars. Yeah.
If they're sitting right down on the bottom, the heat's too much. The water needs to be able to circulate underneath it.
And then how much garlic?
However much you want to put in. I usually put 2 cloves.
Okay.
And 2 onion halves, you know, use what you got, but I stuff the jar, I lay the jar on its side and stuff it.
That way? Okay.
Because you can, you know, why waste the pickling juice if you can get them all in there. And then another helpful hint is after you eat your pickles, don't throw your good pickle juice out. Cut up carrots or celery, whatever, and throw it in there in your refrigerator for a week or so, and they're delicious. You have another snack without wasting all that good stuff. I don't know if it would be good to pickle more cucumbers or not.
And how much dill?
Well, use what you've got. I mean, I put maybe 2.
We're thinking we're going to have 3 jars, so we'll just divide it up. Oh, I love the smell of this.
A lot of this you have, you know, you get a basic recipe with how much garlic, onion, or dill to put in. You make it by the recipe the first time, and then you can sort of adjust those flavors to suit yourself as long as you stay with the basic acidity for a safety measure. The other day I had some yellow cucumbers that somebody gave me. They look just like lemons. And I made some pickles, but I didn't have any more dill. All my dill had gone to seed. So I went out and got tarragon and stuffed my jars with tarragon, and we'll see how that tastes. If it's terrible, all I've done is waste some vinegar or sugar, salt.
All right, that one's filled.
All
Now,
right.
is it best to fill all of your jars first and then start with the brine?
I do. I don't know.
That's why I
Do
asked,
it.
because that's what
Yep.
I would do.
When you're doing pickles, the water bath canner will hold 7 quarts or 8 pints. So you want to kind of base your recipe on that. So this is a good way. You can just slide your pickle slices right in there and jam them in real close, tight. You don't want to waste your pickling juice, and they'll be fine, right? I don't know if we'll have enough to do all 4 jars.
I might. I've got one more left, and we'll see if I. So this one's okay. This one needs more. This one, oh, definitely needs more.
Yep,
This
if
one?
you lay them on your
That's
side,
okay.
wiggle them.
There we go. One more.
So again, these lids are only good for one use in canning, but it doesn't mean you have to throw them away, because if you have cereal that you want to store in glass jars or flour that you want to put in glass jars, you can use these lids for that purpose. Just make sure you don't try to reuse them for canning, because they won't work.
So your brine mixture, does it need to boil for any amount of time, or do you just bring it
until
to?
the salt and sugar is dissolved.
Okay.
You have to make sure that, yep, that it's clear.
And how far do you fill your jars?
You want to leave some headspace. So they say 1/2 inch, headspace. You don't need to measure it. Don't worry about it. Just make sure you don't want anything sticking up that's going to inhibit the seal.
So stop right there.
Yep, right about there is good.
And then quickly put on your lid.
And when you screw your lid on, you don't want to screw it down as hard as you can. You want it to be firm
Oh, the
but
lid,
not
yeah.
cranked.
Right.
And then you can put that right in the water bath.
Okay.
And go on to the next one so that it doesn't cool off. What we're aiming for is for the heat to release any air bubbles that are in there and to expand the juice so that we force the air out. And then when you take your jars out of this canner and you set them on a heat-proof surface, like this wooden board would be good, or a cutting board, a wooden table, a folded dishcloth, anything that's heat resistant and not too cold. You wouldn't want to set it down on something really cold because they're boiling hot.
Can you check your, excuse me?
Yep.
You want to check to make sure, I've got that at an angle.
It'll straighten up when you get some more in there.
Gotcha.
It'll be fine. So when you set your jars out and they start to cool down, it's going to pop that jar lid, make it concave. And so we're going to film that when we take the jars out, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the pops, because if you do not hear that pop, your jar didn't seal, and you better put it in the refrigerator and use it soon.
That's why this tool's so handy, because I have too much dough sticking out. Get in there.
And when you're cranking your lids down, it's not a bad idea to take a dish rag and just, after you put your liquid in, go around and make sure that your rim is clean and dry. You gonna have enough for the?
Oh, I don't think we'll make 4. No, we're right at 3. Alrighty, we need to cover these with some more water, and then we can start timing.
All right, so that's what we want, is just to have all the lids covered. We want it to come back up to a boil, and then we'll time it. make sure the lid's on tight now. Don't do this at home.
Yeah, make sure you have, got your, I'll let you do that then.
There's another one in the drawer.
Yeah, I always have to get the water at the top.
All right, so you'll find out that these were, and see, it's still bubbling. It's still boiling in there. So now we have to just wait, and you'll hear them go pop, pop, pop as they seal. They cool, and it'll suck the lid back down. These were filled very well. We heard, you know, there's maybe a lot of space in this one. Probably could have put the rest of that in there, but it's good.
How long does it typically take for them to pop?
Not long, generally, 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, I'd say that in 5 minutes.
Oh, there it goes.
Ours have been out of the water and cooling for about 15 minutes. And we were able to hear 2 of them we call pop, which means they're sealed. One has not, so I'm going to try and look like this to find the one that hasn't. It was this one, right? Yeah. So this means that it has not sealed, and we can't trust that we can leave this out. We have to refrigerate it now. So it'll still taste great, and you still got some good pickles, but you can't save this one. That's got to go in the fridge. And then these 2 you can save in your cupboard or wherever you'd like to keep your canned
Why
goods.
don't you tap on them and show
Oh,
the
sure.
different noise and
Okay.
how the thing in the center goes down.
Yeah, there's a little, like, dome here that will go down. These are still warm. There. Hear that one? It's still up. So that's how you can tell. I also like to tell by looking because I don't want to encourage it falsely. Okay, so that's it with the canning of pickles.
Let them sit for at least a week, at least, to pickle, to soak
Right,
up all
yeah.
the flavors.
Yeah. Yeah, before you eat those. And they will be good for more than a year, right? How long do you guys keep yours?
So however, when I eat them,
Okay.
if
And
they
then-
taste good, they're fine.
Yeah, and then I have, sometimes for when I do jellies and things, because they look so much alike, you can buy these labels, which will come right off when you wash your jars, or you can just take a magic marker and put the year on it. I always put the year on so that you can remember these were canned in 2020, and just a good way to make sure that your food is safe to eat.
Right.
And that it's okay. Yeah. And I think that's it. And so now we'll be ready to take questions.
Yummy.